Welcome everyone. Today we have a special presentation from Uponor on their new approach to plumbing with PEX. It's called Logic Plumbing. And as you might imagine, it's supposed to provide faster hot water delivery while reducing water and material waste. That description sounds good to me, but to tell us more about it, please meet Tim Pike. Tim Pike is the product manager for plumbing at Uponor, a leading manufacturer of PEX tubing and a worldwide provider of plumbing, fire safety, and radiant heating and cooling systems for residential and commercial applications. He has more than 20 years of experience with a background in product management, quality, manufacturing, distribution, and sales and marketing. He is a professional member of the Minnesota Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling Contractors Organization and has an educational background in machining, quality assurance, and business. He's going to give us a brief rundown of the different types of plumbing methodologies and then go into an in-depth look at PEX plumbing before talking about the benefits of Uponor's Logic plumbing line. During the course of today's presentation, you can submit questions for our guest. To do so, simply use the small box at the bottom of the Q&A. I'll review those questions and pose them to Tim during the Q&A time set aside near the end of the webcast. Tim, please introduce us to Logic Plumbing.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. For everybody east of the Mississippi, I should say, good morning to the people out west. I'm going to talk to you about the Logic Plumbing, like Mike talked about, and I hope you find this information very valuable. And I'm having an operating system problem here. All right. The agenda we're going to go over, we're going to talk about common plumbing beliefs. We're going to cover what really is logic plumbing. We're going to cover what exactly is PEX piping. We're going to show a logic plumbing video. We're going to talk about the benefits of logic. We're also going to talk about plumbing method comparisons. And then we're going to go through an exercise of some actual logic layout. Okay, common plumbing beliefs. I apologize. All plumbing systems are essentially the same. And as long as we can keep all the water inside, that's what everybody's concerned about. The homeowner certainly doesn't care. They just want the fluid to come out of the fixture, and that's it. I'm having some system issues here because it's jumping around on me. But traditional rigid plumbing systems, we've got the pitfalls of the CPVC and the copper pipes. And what we see in those typical situations is you're going to have corrosion buildup inside of your copper. Those are all the minerals that are coming out of the water and adhering themselves to the copper tubing itself. We can have some freeze damage on your CPVC pipe. And CPVC pipe, actually, you will not know if it's being damaged because its damage occurs from the inside out. So until it actually fractures the outside wall, you really do not have to, you will not know if you have an issue or not until it's too late. Copper, depending on where you live, can create pinholes. That's just because of aggressive water situations. Then you've also got your freeze damage that can happen in cold climates on copper. And that's a very brittle burst once it does go. So you got the chemical reactions going on here, as I talked about. There's freeze damages. Your thaw reactions can happen. Your life cycle costs we're going to be talking about. And basically, homeowners do care about what happens with their plumbing systems. You've got condensation that's a real issue, especially on the cold water side and in climates where you're going to have high moisture in the air. You're also going to have water hammer as an issue. And water hammer happens when you have a quick closing device such as a valve for a washing machine shuts off, the sudden break in that water flow will actually cause tremendous amounts of PSI to build up, and that's what you hear when you hear that water hammer. It's actually the plumbing system trying to take in all of that pressure buildup, and it's got to move someplace. Velocity noise, that's the actual sound of the fluid moving through the pipes, is a problem. And homeowners really do care. Most people just think they always have to accept a noisy plumbing system, whether it's the potable water side, whether it's the drain water side. Most people just accept this and think that that's the way life is. Now, what is logic? The way we describe it at Uponor is it's a nice organized arrangement of all of our multi-port T's that we have, all of our cross-linked polyethylene pipes, our out-of-the-wall systems, which are how do you get the PEX itself out of the wall and how do you hold it in a very firm spot so that you can apply valves, things like that. And all of our fittings are a cold expansion fitting listed to an ASTM F896, 1960, excuse me. It's a larger diameter fitting than your standard insert fitting. We have to actually expand the pipe before we can insert the fitting itself, and then the pipe will shrink down around the fitting. By combining all of these, you can pick up some really, really good efficiencies in your installs. And a better, more efficient install is less time on the job, less liability because you're cutting the pipe, you're not putting in all these connections, so you're going to get better hot water delivery systems as well, and superior flow characteristics as opposed to any other PEX piping system. So, what is PEX? A lot of people are not familiar with what PEX is, and PEX is an acronym. It stands for polyethylene, which is the PE, and then cross-linked, which is the X. And what is cross-linking? It's actually where we take the carbon atoms and we reconfigure them through an extrusion process and temperature. And what that does is we take these straight line molecules in a regular high density polyethylene pipe and we turn them into, it would be like a chain link fence. We have realigned all those molecules so that they can really handle increased pressures and temperatures. And the temperature ratings on all PEXs are exactly what you see here. 200 at 80 psi, 180 at 100 psi, and then 73.4 at 160 psi. It can handle tremendous amounts of pressure. And these are lifetime operating temperatures. It's not just maximum temp that it can handle. So, again, there's lots of different PEXs out in the marketplace, and they're not all created the same. The methodology that we utilize is the PEX-a angle, and its crosslink percent is 80% plus. Your PEX-b is a silane type of PEX. It has a lower crosslink level, 65 to 70. And then there's PEX-c that is cross-linked by a radiation method that has a 70 to 75%. And because those methodologies for cross-linking are different, and we're going to go through those, you'll see how the angle method gives you the most superior PEX product in the marketplace. So what are the benefits of the PEX-a versus the others? Right here. We cross-link our product above the crystalline melt point, meaning when it comes out of the extruders very clear and very hot, and it's in a tube form, it's already cross-linked. We do not do anything else to it. And you have consistent cross-linking all the way through that tube wall. When you look at a PEX-b per se, what they do is they extrude a lot faster than we do. But when it comes off their extruder, it is not a cross-linked product at that time. They have to go through a secondary process to cross-link. And what they do is they put it in a heat and moisture chamber. That heat and that moisture will then activate the silanes to start the cross-linking process. And because they're cross-linking this in its tube form, you're going to get that moisture mostly on the outside of the tube and some on the inside of the tube, and it doesn't penetrate the tube wall. And then when you look at PEX-c, the radiation method of cross-linking, it is extruded much like PEX-b is. It has some compounds inside the tube wall. They extrude it very quickly. They put it on a large reel. Then they take that tubing and they send it through a radiation tunnel. And that tunnel is hitting the radiation on the outside of the tubing only. So you're going to have your cross-linking mostly on the outside of the tubing and not nearly as much on the inside of the tubing. So by having the consistent cross-linking across its entire tube wall like Uponor does, it results in extreme flexibility, increased thermal and elastic properties, which is the shape memory that we're going to talk about and how you make our connection. More benefits, the ability to mechanically expand our pipe versus PEX-b or PEX-c. That allows us to insert a larger diameter expansion fitting, we call it, and then the pipe will shrink down around that fitting. We have greater flow characteristics than we do at the competitors that have a copper crimp system or a copper or a stainless steel crimp system. The cross-linking process that we utilize allows us to also heat kink repair the product. You can actually take our tubing, kink it about a dozen times. You will not have a broken pipe. You can actually take a heat gun, keep it about 3 or 4 inches away from the pipe, rotate it around the pipe, and it will turn clear, much as you see in this picture here. At that point, it has gone back to its memory size that it cross-linked at. So that spot will not be a weak point in the pipe anywhere. As a matter of fact, you've re-stimulated the cross-linking process a little bit there, and that portion will be even stronger than the rest of the pipe. So we also have the higher freeze resistance. Nothing is freeze-proof. It is freeze-resistant. And our pipe will expand if you get an ice dam in that about 3 times its OT. And it doesn't shatter or become brittle. Actually, the colder our pipe gets, the stronger it gets. And again, when you compare it to CPVC, you will not know you have an issue with CPVC until it is too late and it's already through the entire tube wall because it fractures from the inside out. Okay, some more benefits of PEX-a. Again, we have that 80% plus cross-linking. We have a tight bend radius, 6 times the OD. So you can do about a 3.75 inch bend radius. So that affords you the ability to go around corners without putting elbows in. Again, Uponor's message is, do not cut the pipe. Don't put a fitting in it if you don't need one. So, and then PEX-a, when we cross-link it, we cool it in a straight form before it goes onto a large reel and goes to the recoil operations. So it's always going to want to go back to that straight pipe through that thermal memory. So, and then the coiled pipes give us a lot of good advantages. It's going to reduce scrap material waste. It's going to be fewer couplings and elbows, things like that. And once you do not cut the pipe and you go around corners without making connections, fewer leak potential points. Again, managing your liability. And the components in our logic system we talked about a little earlier. We've got the flexible corrosion-resistant PEX tubing, our engineered polymer EP multiports and directionals. We have a full line of lead-free transition fittings. We are completely outfitted for the January 4th, 2014 national lead law that is taking effect next year. And then we have out-of-the-wall boxes, so you can do a complete system from inlet to outlet. We're going to watch a logic video here.
With its unique arrangement of flexible tubing and inline components, Uponor Logic is an infinitely flexible plumbing system that will change how you design and install residential plumbing systems. The Uponor plumbing system offers a complete range of plumbing components, including Aquapex tubing, multi-port tees, ProPEX fittings, and out-of-the-wall systems. These provide flexible solutions that take significantly less time to install and fewer materials than traditional plumbing techniques. This typical home example only requires 16 fittings for a total of 59 secure plumbing connections, with no dry fitting or risk of incomplete connections. Compared to a typical trunk and branch home, that's 1/6 the number of fittings and nearly 1/3 the number of connections. Compared to a typical home run plumbed house, Uponor systems use 1/3 the linear run of pipe. To begin using the Uponor Logic system, simply follow our 3-step planning process. Using your building plans, identify the location of all plumbing outlets and hot and cold wall fixtures. Mark all fixture groupings that fall within an approximate 10-foot radius of one another on each floor, as they can use a common hot or cold supply line. Chart the most direct supply line path through the floor plan to connect all your fixture groupings. Finally, select the proper location for the multi-port T for each fixture grouping. Maximizing your multi-port Ts reduces fitting needs as well as the fixture connections. Based on our 2 core components of Uponor Aquapex tubing and ProPEX technology, Uponor Logic provides a complete system for any residential or commercial application. With over 15 billion feet installed to date, we have flexible solutions for every plumbing installation. Smart, efficient, durable. Uponor Logic at work.
All right. I like that video a lot. It really sets the example of how we train people in the field too. We really want them to step back and think about what they're doing, because plumbing so many times can just be so automatic. You really need to be able to sit back and re-examine exactly how you do things, because we're going to approach you and challenge you to think out of the box. And there is a better way. We just have to get that message across. So, more logic benefits. Again, we kind of touched on this already. Fewer connections. Our multiports are a really, really nice item that affords us the ability to take this message and really believe in it, because here is a great example where if you're going to plumb a house with trunk and branch, if you did not use one of our multiports, you would use all of those T's. You would have 18 connections, and if you tried to duplicate that, it would be 22 inches long. So again, Uponor is all about do not cut that pipe if you don't have to. We have so many different multi-port options that are available that we'll be very surprised if we're challenged with something that we may or may not have. So when we also talk about not cutting the pipe, when we talk about less liabilities, reduced liabilities, we're talking about, again, thinking out of the box. How can I plumb this without putting a connection here? There is a way to do it. So with ours, fewer connections is always going to be the fewer leak points. It's ours, with the way the fitting goes together, it's always a visual connection. You cannot dry fit it. What do we mean by dry fit? If you look at the picture down in the lower left-hand corner here, if you have a copper crimp system and it's up in a ceiling area or a roofing area where you can't really see it from the floor level, looking at those connections, it's tough to tell if it's actually been crimped or not. With ours, you can actually see that it's finished, because you cannot put our pipe together without expanding the pipe first. because the OD of our fitting is larger than the ID of the pipe. So it is impossible to do what is going on here in this picture. Talk about faster installs. If you're not cutting the pipe as much and you're using those coil quantities, you're zipping that pipe through all these holes, and it's going to be a faster install because you're making fewer connections. And in a typical bill of materials, you're going to see about a 65% fewer connections. And then we've also got faster connections. With the Milwaukee expander tools, you can put together these connections in seconds. We're also not going to use any glues. We're not going to be gluing anything together. And with CPVC and glues, there's so many factors that can be involved in using that type of a system. What's the temperature outside? How long do you have to let it dry before you can put pressure on it? That's like 24 hours at a minimum. Now throw some humidity in there and you may be talking a couple of days. Did they get enough glue in there or did they not get enough glue in there? Then when you're talking about the insert side, you don't have to use any gauges. I would challenge contractors, if they're using copper crimps, show me your gauge, your go-no-go gauges. Do you know where they are? Do you use them on every connection? You're also going to have, with faster installs, I've got another video that we're going to watch here. And what you're going to see here is we're going to plumb with logic. We're going to do a crimp system. We're going to do the CPVC, and we're going to do the copper. And as you can see, the contractors we had come in to do these on the crimp and the CPVC, we had one dry fit each. All right. Okay. Another benefit of the logic is you can have faster hot water delivery. What we do is much like they did that video, you want to take the shortest route possible, keep those drops to a minimum length, and things should go along very nicely there for you. The shorter consecutive use time versus trunk and branch or home run. And then we also have what we call a demand hot water delivery system. It is a user-activated pump. So you can get the benefits of having a recirc system without it running all the time or being on a timer, because you activate it either through a motion sensor or a push button. And you can have water to the tap in seconds. You can also save up to 40 gallons per day in a typical house. Again, here's a chart showing that faster hot water delivery system. And we're talking about second consecutive use time here. It's 30% faster than the trunk and branch, and then 50% faster than the home run. And as a matter of fact, some of the numbers that are out, when you compare ounces of water per foot of tubing, when you want to compare type L copper to PEX, we have 24% less water in the line that you have to dump and drain. That's on a half-inch pipe. As compared to CPVC, it's 6% less. And as you get up in sizes, it only gets greater and greater. Like for instance, type L copper against 1-inch PEX is 29% less. And then on the CPVC, we have 12% less. So not only are you going to get the water there faster, you're also going to waste less water as well. Some logic plumbing examples. We're going to talk about rough-in plumbing only, and we're going to show you 3 different types of systems here. A slab-on-grade single-story house. We're going to talk about a 2-story house, and then we're going to have a very large bungalow. So we're going to go through and step through this just like the video said. We're going to logically look at this. We're going to look at the zones and how much plumbing is required. So we're going to look at this one here, and right there we've got 3 cold and 2 hot. We're going to look at this little section, and we're going to have 4 cold and 3 hot there. Then we're going to look at this, and we're going to come up with 2 cold and 2 hot. So we start the water heater. We're going to have these parts to hook up the water heater, and then we're going to take off with the pipe, and we're going to go to this first section here. We'll use a 2-port and a 3-port multi-port. We're going to pass through on this because we still have these other zones on the left to be able to plumb here. So when we look at the next zone, where it had the 4 cold and 3 hot, again, we're going to use a 4-port and a 3-port multi-port. We want to do that so that we can still pass through to the last part of the plumbing system in this house. And here, because it's only 2 cold and 2 hot, we're able to use a couple of T's because that's the end of the plumbing system right there. So a bill of materials is basically going to look like this. I do not have the pipe on there. This is just the fin configurations you would need to complete that plumbing system. So we're talking about 14 fittings with about 34 connections. And if you did copper or CPVC, we're talking about somewhere around 102 connections. The next one, we're going to look at a 2-story house. We're going to go through this with the exact same logic as we did with the last one, and just like they did on the video. So in the basement area, we would have these things to start the plumbing system right here. Next, we're going to go to the main floor, and we're going to have the half bath. We're going to use a T and a 2-port multi-port because we're still going to pass through and we're going to plumb some other areas of this house because we got 2 cold and 1 hot there. And those are the T's we're going to use to do this portion now. Now that part of this house doing logic is completely plumbed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to be taking off up to the upstairs now. And upstairs is where we're going to do this first bathroom area. We're going to have 3 cold and 2 hot there, so we're going to use, again, a 2-port and a 3-port pass-through multi-port because we still have other areas upstairs that have to be plumbed. And the next area we're going to plumb is going to be the big master bath here. There we're going to have those 4 cold and the 3 hot. And again, because we still have some other portions to the left of this that have to be plumbed, we're still going to use a 3-port and a 4-port multi-port pass-through. Then when we get to the end here, we're going to be using a branch style multi-port. It's not a pass-through anymore because we're at the end of the plumbing system now. So as you can see, what we're going to do is we're going to hit these two spots right here, and we're going to plumb from the bottom and we're going to plumb from the top. And we got the 3 cold and the 2 hot, so we're able to use a T and the 3-port multi-port. And that's what this bill of materials would look like. When we go to the bottom line, again, we're talking about 17 fittings, 51 connections, versus somewhere over around 150 connections if you used CPVC or copper. And now the largest bungalow. This will be the last bill of materials we'll look at for this moment. Again, we're going to start in the basement. Going to look at the main floor. We're going to do this zone here. It's going to have 4 cold, 4 hot. So we're going to use 4-port pass-throughs here. We're going to look at the next zone. We're going to be using a 3 and a 2 because we got 3 cold and 2 hot. We're going to pass through to the next area. We're going to be using a 3 and a 2 because we've got 3 cold, 2 hot. We're also going to be putting 2 bend supports in here. And again, we're not going to cut the pipe. We're not going to put a 3/4 elbow in there. You don't have to, because now we're going to go up to the next level again, and we're going to catch the master bath here. Now that's the end of the plumbing system there, so we can use branch multi-ports at that point. And we're going to use a 4 and a 3 because that's the requirements there. 4 cold, 3 hot. And again, this is what that bill of materials would look like. We're going to have 18 fittings with about 47 connections versus the approximate 130 connections on the others. So, does anybody have any questions so far? All right.
I'm not seeing it at the moment, Tim, but I would say that, as you kind of reach towards the conclusion here, we'll get to those Q&A right at the end there.
Okay. All righty then. We will travel on. Okay, so let's do a recap here. And all the things about the Logic plumbing benefits are what we talked about previously. Again, it's like overstating it over and over and over. I know it can get tiring to hear, but this is the mantra that we need to live by. Fewer connections, reduced liabilities, faster installs because of the fewer connections, and then you're going to have your faster hot water delivery. So that is it. I hope that you've all taken something away from this. I welcome your questions. I'm anxious to answer them for you, so please.
Well, I know, Tim, I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Often they'll talk about centralizing the mechanicals in a home to try and encourage those efficiencies.
Yes.
Is that still something that Uponor is encouraging with the Logic plumbing system?
Yes, very much so. I know that there's a great push out there by many builders. They want to shrink the size of the plumbing systems without taking away any of the benefits that the plumbing systems deliver and the fixtures that they're putting in these homes. So centralizing things as much as possible is a great alternative to that. It can't always happen, but Logic can be used very well in that environment because remember we talked earlier, we want to keep those drops off the multi-ports as small and as short as possible because that will, again, speed hot water delivery to the system.
Okay. I figured so, but I just wanted to confirm that. The other question I had was for the examples of the freeze-damaged pipes that you showed earlier, and also when you mentioned velocity noise. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, some codes require pipe insulation now?
Yeah, a lot of the piping insulation is mostly around codes that are going to require you to put the insulation on the pipe so that you can maintain the cold water temperature,
Okay.
and it doesn't drop. It reduces condensation situations. So there's lots of states adopting these codes for insulation on any piping material, really.
Well, and I didn't know if that pipe insulation was going to improve that freeze damage and the velocity noise, or if it really you found it to be negligible. I didn't know what you had found.
Well, the insulation will always give you some factor of noise reduction, but the noise actually comes from inside the pipe. So it'll reduce its output a little bit, but it's still not going to take it away and make it negligible.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured. I certainly want to we have a number of questions coming in now, and we appreciate everyone seeing the Q&A box and typing in their questions, and please keep them coming. We're gonna start with Robert. Robert wants to know if the Uponor Logic system can be integrated into a fire suppression system like sprinklers.
Yes, you can actually. We have a looped fire suppression system, and once you come off of that loop, you can drop down into the wall cavity area, and you can be putting a multi-port down in there. You cannot put them in the loop itself that is primarily the fire loop, but once you come off of that fire loop and you have branched away from it, then you can use Logic, yes.
Okay. We also have a question about asking if you have any comments about connections at the fixtures, because there's a variety of connection types and formats.
Yes, there is, and I think you'll notice where we typically are going to end our plumbing system is going to be at the valves we sell, because there's so many different riser type of connections out there that people like to use. Some people like to have chrome, some people like to have flexibles, some people like to have stainless steel braided. So we allow those people that manufacture those types of things to be able to hook up to our systems. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Question from Cliff. He was looking at the three different example layouts that you had. He noticed that none of them included a recirculation pump and was wondering why that
Well,
was not in there.
only because that is an option that we sell. If we, to be honest with you, I did have one of those in here at one time, and we decided to take it out only because most people have not in the past been interested in having a demand system. But at the end of the plumbing line there, especially on a 3/4 inch line, you could easily just use a pass-through multi-port and then have that 3/4 inch line come back right through the demand pump system. So there's nothing preventing us from doing it, and on a Logic system, it makes a whole lot of sense. We just, to his point, we did not put that in the slide.
Okay. Jake says hi, and he has a question for you. He says that he works with thermostatic valves that are 3/4 inch, and he wants to know if he has to oversize the line for full flow, which would go up to 16 gallons a minute.
That's a good question. I will have to get the answer for him on that. I'm not positive how to answer that one right now, Jake. I apologize for that, but I will research that and get that answer, and we'll send it back through the Greenbill group here and get you an answer.
Okay. Yeah, and I just asked him to shoot me his email address so that we can follow up with him. Mike has a question, not me, a different Mike. He wants to know what precautions need to be taken to make sure the tubing is not punctured by hanging pictures on the walls or any kind of other penetrations, hanging cabinetry or anything else like that.
Well, we typically, when we're going to do an install, if you're going to pass through a stud, we have to, if it's a wood stud, we require steel plates to be put over that penetration so you can't penetrate with a screw there. If we're running it down in a cavity, we're going to try to tie the tubing to the stud wall, so somewhere in the middle. So that hopefully will be enough to prevent anybody from accidentally poking a big hole in that. Your picture frame type of nails, things like that, are typically not going to go through far enough to be able to penetrate a tube wall on the piping system. Not saying it's not impossible to do, but typically if you know that there's a plumbing pipe in that wall, you do want to take care.
Okay. I wanted to encourage people, keep sending those questions in. We've got some great questions. I was going to get to Frank's question now. He wants to know if you can discuss the use of these systems for natural gas piping. They designed and made for that?
In Europe, they do use a PEX-based product for natural gas. It is a different pipe. The pipe that we make in the United States for crosslinked polyethylene, we cannot use in natural gas situations. It's not approved for that, and there's a lot of other people in the marketplace that use HDPE with special coatings on them and things like that for natural gas right now.
Is that something that Uponor is pursuing, the possible use
Not
of this?
Not in North America at this time.
Okay. Okay. I don't see any other questions at this time, so I'll kind of put out the final call for questions from our audience. I know we got a lot of good ones. Thanks to Robert and Cliff, Jake and Mike, Frank. Really appreciate you chiming in with those questions. I guess while we wait a couple seconds for some other questions, any final thoughts from you, Tim, on the Logic Plumbing product?
Well, again, I think I don't want to preach too much. That's not what I do, but I really challenge people to step back and think about how the plumbing systems go in, and then work with the contractor to make it a reality that this is how we're always going to do things. And if we do it enough, it becomes habit. And if you do it enough, it becomes repetitive. And then you can see this as you're going along. It'll become second nature. It's always challenging to get anybody to think out of the box and do things that are a little different. But if you can find what motivates that person, it should be a fairly easy go of it then. And, you know, we have reps nationwide that can work with contractors as well and really push the Logic message along further if they need that assistance. That is out there for them, and they can call us here at Uponor and find out where the local rep would be for their area.
Okay. That final call generated quite a few more questions, so I'm happy to see it for the gentlemen who have chimed in. So I want to get back to those. I want to get to Lance. This is his first question. And I'm sure this is a question probably on a lot of people's minds. What is the cost of the Logic versus the traditional type of plumbing once the learning curve is passed? And I know I want to preface the question by saying I know a lot of times with manufacturers it's hard to get into pricing discussions. I guess a parameter or approximation or ballpark would probably be the fair way to ask the question.
Yeah, you know, I that is it's a tough one to answer because, you know, every area is going to be slightly different, but it really shouldn't. It should be a good trade-off. I don't know if I don't believe it'll cost any more. I don't necessarily think it'll cost any less. Again, I don't know. That's a tough one for a manufacturer to answer. So I think you'll have to work with your contractors and have that open discussion and find out, you know, if we do this, where do we stand?
Right, because you've got two components to it. You've got the material cost, and you've also got the labor cost, and the time is money. So,
yes.
I want to get back to Frank. Frank was the one who asked about natural gas piping, so he follows up with, well, how about using this for vent piping?
Well, you know, nobody. I shouldn't say nobody. There might be somebody out there using it for vent piping, but it's not listed for vent piping. And I find it hard to believe an AHJ is going to allow that if it doesn't have all the proper listings for it.
Okay. Mike has a question. Since the system is relatively new, are warranties available, either through Uponor or other means, regarding the degradation of the tubing material?
Well, that's an interesting question. Mike, it's really not a new system. We have been manufacturing this PEX tubing since 1972. And we're the only manufacturer that that has been outperforming and out manufacturing for our 25-year warranty. So all of our fitting programs and our Aquapex tubing and Propex fittings are all warranted for 25 years. So we've got over 15 billion feet of this stuff in worldwide use right now. So it may be new to you, but I encourage you to dig in and learn more about it. And Uponor is the worldwide leader for a reason, because we have been making it for so long. Some of our competitors came into the marketplace after they had bad experiences with the polybutylene back in the mid-90s. So I hope that answers your question.
I hope so too. We'll hear from him if we don't, I guess. Jake has a question again. He wants to know if there's going to be less water hammer with the flexible quality of the PEX. He also wants to know if you still use nitrogen-filled shock arresters to mitigate any kind of problem.
You know, your AHJ is going to decide whether you have to or not have to use water hammer arresters with a PEX system. Some areas, they're still going to require it. Some, they do not, because they understand that the flexibility of the PEX pipe can absorb a great amount of that water hammer. And I don't have the data in front of me, but if I remember correctly, we're about 35–40% less pressure built up versus copper when that quick acting valve closes from an overall PSI perspective. So not only does PEX decrease that overall PSI that builds up from the water hammer, but it also will then absorb that water hammer better. But again, it's going to be up to the AHJ whether he has to put water hammer arresters in or not.
Okay. Robert wants to go back to the topic of fire suppression. Is it separate from the cold water supply lines, or is it integral with the cold water supply lines?
Our system is integral. So every time you open a tap or turn on a faucet, you are moving cold water plumbing through the fire suppression system.
Okay. Jake wants to talk about shower valves for a second. Can you use, or he says you can use PEX to the valve, but do you use PEX from the valve to the tub spout, the shower head, the body spray connections? How does that work?
You can go to the shower head with it, yes. Not the tub spout though. The reason being is PEX has a slightly smaller ID than copper or CPVC. So that little bit of back pressure that could be caused can actually bypass the shower valve and come leaking out the shower head. It's just a phenomena, PEX. Plus PEX has also got, it's flexible. So tying a tub spout to PEX is a very difficult task, and keeping it straight and secure, things like that. So to the shower head all day long, to the faucet itself all day long, but we do not like to see it to the tub spout. All right?
Okay. Well, those are all the questions I see in the queue, so I very much appreciate the audience questions. Always love it when the audience gets engaged and is inquisitive, because it really brings out the value in webinars like these. So to the audience, I very much appreciate it. To Tim, I certainly appreciate the time today.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us. I also wanted to remind all of you of the next Impact Series webinar. That's going to take place on Thursday, September 5th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Steve Nygren will explain the concept behind the Serenbe development outside of Atlanta and share his vision of a way to balance both growth and nature. Until next time, take care.